So welcome back. We are talking to Elder Daniel Walter, who started many years ago Adventist Pilots Association back in the early 60s. We took a break yesterday, and now we are here catching part two of the story. We left off, Elder, at in Brazil. You have a lake amphibian. You had a Lake 180, if memory serves me.
That's right.
Yeah. And you were telling me that you were getting ready to get another plane at that time, or you got another plane at that time. Tell us what happened from there.
Well, first off, the 180 horse engine wasn't powerful enough
No.
really for the work there. I had an experience, for instance, I was taking 2 or 3 men with me, and we were headed on a long journey. We had to stop for fuel. Well, I sent fuel by boat up to certain stations along the way so that I'd have fuel when I got there. We're going into this one place called Manicore on the Rio Madeira, the Wood River.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the 11 tributaries of the Amazon that are bigger than the Mississippi. And as I approached, they did have a government airport there and a control tower. So I called towers. I'd seen this rain shower go by. I thought, I don't know about that runway. So I called the tower man, and he said, yeah, it's a little bit humid here. Fact was, they had just shaled that runway, but hadn't packed it yet. And so I came around and landed on the overrun where it was hard clay.
Mm-hmm.
And everything went fine there. But as soon as I hit that shale, it was like I'd hit the arrestor hook. It was, and we were stopped. At full power, I was able to pull the thing into the ramp where I could get the gas tunnel. And then to get out.
Mm.
I went back as far as I could back in the bushes on that overrun. And I managed to get up to about 45 miles an hour before I hit the shale. Well, I pulled the nose wheel up and managed to get it up to about 55, but I needed 65 to get loose from the ground.
Rotate. Mm-hmm.
So I was going down there at 55, not gaining a mile per hour. Finally, the Lord gave me the idea. I pulled the aileron clear over, got one wheel out. Now I'm running on one wheel.
Yeah, let's drag.
And there were mud puddles and water up ahead. And so on one wheel, I went careening around this way and that way, and finally got it to 65, and it came
You
loose.
could rotate. Oh, great.
That was a 180 horse engine. When I wore that one out at about 1,000 hours,
Yeah.
it was time for another airplane.
Mm-hmm.
By this time, Lake had come out with a 200 horsepower version. And so we arranged with the Quiet Hour and whoever would sponsor us.
Oh, yes.
And we got the 200 horse engine down there. I think it was not long after we got the 200 horse. I usually did most of the flying for the mission, but there were other organizations that needed my services too. For instance, the Indian Service. They had placed, I think it was 10 men, at an outpost up north on the Rio Alalao. There was 2 tribes of Indians there that were resisting the Army Corps of Engineers. They were putting through the Pan American Highway on the eastern side. And they were picking off the bulldozer drivers with their arrows, and they needed to make contact because they didn't want the civilized people coming into their territory.
Mm-hmm.
They were afraid that they would lose their hunting ground and whatever. And here these bulldozers were coming through making a big track. And so the Indian Service put this little post up there and manned it with 10 men to try to make contact with these people and make friends with them, eventually learn enough of their language that they could explain. We're just putting this road through. We're not going to allow any civilized people anywhere in the area, and we just need to go through. And so these men would report into headquarters every morning at 6 o'clock. And the evening before, they had said, we have visitors tonight. Okay, nothing bad with that. But the next morning, when the headquarters called, there was no response. They waited till 6:30, no response. 7 o'clock, no response. They called me and they said, Pastor, how soon can you be ready to go to Alalau? Well, I kept a suitcase ready. I already had my 4 hammocks in the plane, certain survival gear. So Dorothy made up a couple sandwiches for me and away I went. I had no idea how long I'd be there. It took about an hour and a half to get up to the Alalau area. As the engineers were going and making the road, they made certain sections of it wide enough that we could actually land on the road. And landed, we asked the road crew, have you seen any of the Indian Service men? They said, no sign of anybody. So then we flew up over the Indian Service camp. It was a mile or two up from where the ferry was going to go across. It was upriver a little bit. Went over there. The dog came out and looked at us, and the chickens were running around, but no people. We thought, uh-oh, there's trouble. And so we flew over the Indian Service camp. Dog came out, chickens running around, no people. So we got down just 3 feet off the water and flew upstream, looking to see where people might be. Didn't find any. The lead man said, okay, now up and over the trees. So we went up and inland just a bit, and here was the Indian camp. It was just one big round house made of thatch. And we circled it, low altitude, looking around. Dog came out and looked. Finally, we saw a hand come out with a lighted torch and threw it up on the roof. And the man told me, that's the sign that they know that they're being pursued, they're getting out of here. They burned their own house. But he says, there's a second one just on in. So we went on in, and sure enough, second one. We did the same thing, low level circling, till the hand came out, lit it. He said, okay, now we're okay.
Now, were they doing that for your sake so you could see that, or are they that's just what they do?
That's just what they do.
Huh?
When they know that they're being pursued, they burn their own house and move on. And so we knew that they had a guilty conscience and they were not going to stick around. Then we went back and landed. It was very difficult to get in there because of the river currents and so on. I had only one little place that I could shove the airplane up to the beach. One man popped out up onto the top of the airplane with his revolver, cleared the area. Then the other man got up. He had only a machete, padong we call it there. And he stayed with the airplane. The other man went to the top of a little hill. And when he thought it was clear, they traded places again, and the one with the revolver went up to the house. And he called out, I'm going in. He went in, he said, we have one casualty here. And so we carried that body out. Meanwhile, the Indian Service was sending an ambulance up for whatever. So we sent that body back. And all of that took most of the day. That evening, a survivor showed up. And he told us what had happened. The Indians got up early and made signs, let's go hunting.
Mm.
So 2 Indians and 2 of the government guys went off into the woods. He said, I don't know what happened there. But suddenly in the house, the Indians let out a war whoop. And they sliced the one guy's head. They tried to take the head off the next guy, but they only got some gashes on him.
Mm.
And this fella ran out and dove into the river. And since the clearing was new, they had a lot of trees that had fallen into the river. He dove in under the branches and made like he was just drifting down. He watched, and this fella...
They killed the other fellow.
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
He tried to swim to the other side of the river because they knew that the Indians did not know how to swim.
Okay.
And so the one tried to swim to the other side, but every time he'd come up for air, they'd send off a bunch of arrows.
Wow.
And this fellow that was drifting said the last I saw him, he was almost to the other shore. He came up and there went a volley of arrows, and I didn't see anything after that because I drifted in behind the branches. But he said, I'm afraid they got him. And so knowing that much, then we knew more or less what to do for the search.
Mm-hmm.
The next morning, we sent a search party from the road toward the camp, calling for these 2 fellows that had gone out hunting. They found one. He'd had an arrow go through his shoulder. I mean, it went clear through.
Went right through.
All the way through,
Oh, wow.
sticking out both sides. And they had orders not to shoot an Indian. They could fire warnings,
Mm-hmm.
but not shoot. So while he was grabbing for his gun, they shot him in the shoulder. And they shot the other fella, and it went through his abdomen, clear through.
Mm.
And they said it was awful hard to try to run because these arrows are long,
Oh, yeah.
probably 4 or 5 feet long. And so they tried to pull them out, and they couldn't. So they broke them off and then tried to hide in the woods. And this fellow made it out. He reported, and we got him into the ambulance and back to town to have the arrow removed and all that kind of stuff. And so we sent the search party again, and they could not find this other fella. They called his name and they searched everywhere. Finally that night he came out by himself.
Oh, he survived the
He
night.
survived,
Wow.
but he was in pretty poor condition. So we got him and sent him down on the ambulance, but he had gangrene and he didn't make it. Now to get the others. It was right near a place where they frequently camped. But it was right at the top of a cataract, pretty violent cataract there. And so I had to land just above the cataract,
Now, what's a cataract?
waterfall, but not falling directly down, just over the rocks. And
Oh, okay. I never heard of that term before. Okay.
Huh?
All right.
so I had to come down just to the brink of that,
Mm-hmm.
shut my engine down with my paddle. I maneuvered the airplane and shoved the wing back into the forest so that the men could use the wing as a bridge to get over onto land. They went back, and sure enough, they found 3 bodies in there.
Mm-hmm.
So we got them out. And all in all, this took me almost a week. to account for everybody in there.
Hmm.
But the Indian Service gave me a special letter of recognition for bravery, whatever, doing this mission for them. They got their airplane in there. It was an Islander. And of course I needed fuel to keep going. The Pentecostal preacher who had a Cessna 172 on floats, he had sent 1 drum of gas up there. So I used up all his gas. And then when the Islander would come, I would taxi right up to it, and I could siphon from their wing tank right into my fuselage tank. So that's how we kept flying and flying. I don't know how many hours of flying I did on that trip.
Wow, goodness.
Manaus, about 1,000 miles up the Amazon River, was the capital of the state of Amazonas, which is the Texas of Brazil. It's very large. And that was to be my headquarters area. It was headquarters for the Central Amazon Mission, and I was to be connected with them. When I got there, I went ahead of my wife because she had the newborn baby down in Belém. I went ahead to try to find housing for us and so forth. And I stayed with the Habaneks for quite some time. They had a rented house that was arranged quite interesting. Had 1 post in the middle with all the light switches. So if you were going to this room, you had to go out and turn the light on here and then go back to the room. It was quite interesting there. But I spent a month or 2 with them while I was searching for a house. And finally we found a house on the other side of town. It was a 3-bedroom house with 1 bathroom, 1 kitchen. And that was all the plumbing that was there. Was the toilet, a sink, and a kitchen sink. And that was it. And about that time, another family came. Marvin Glantz came to be the agricultural director. And so all 3 of his families were living in this one house. Each family had a bedroom. Each of us had, at that time, 2 children. It was quite a challenge there. But Bob went on and built a house out at the school to live in. I remember going out and helping him build it. He had some professional carpenters working, and they were taking about a week to put down the basic frame and the floor. So I came along and I showed these professionals how that you can lay the studs out, nail them all together, and then just lift the walls up. They'd never seen anything go up so fast. And I got it up to the roof, and I told them, now, for the rafters, you just need to put the center pole up there, or the ridge pole, put these others in, nail them, you'll be done in a day. A week later, they were still up there doing it their way. But anyway, we got the house up, and they moved out there, gave us a little more room in town, and then we found that someone had started a house near the mission office in town. And so builder me, I went down to look it over. The garage on the thing was just as wide as the Volkswagen. No room to open the doors and get out. And on and on. So I took out some walls and spread some things, and they sent in a professional to put in the floor. I said, I want this floor level. Well, the word in Portuguese for level is the same as smooth. And so he took it to be smooth. And from one side of the room to the other, there was a difference of about 2 or 3 inches. I said, no, I want it level. Well, it was hard for him to bite. But anyway, we finally got the house up. I finished it. And we lived there for quite a few years, almost 10 years, I guess, in that house.
Okay.
And the nice thing there was an avocado tree sprout just coming up where they've been throwing the garbage. And it had grown to a fairly good height. People said, you should cut that thing out, it's in your way. I said, no, we're going to leave it for this time. They said, it's never given any fruit. I said, that's all right. So we watered it, threw some more garbage on it, whatever. Next year we had a good crop of avocados. And as that tree grew on up, it had 3 trunks. Each trunk gave fruit at a different time. And we collected as many as 3,000 avocados off that one tree. And we decided that we should sell them and turn the money in for Sabbath school investment. And it just kept right on giving.
According to the Joshua Project, more than 2 billion, almost 2.7 billion people have never heard of Jesus. That's an incredible high number. They've never heard of Jesus. Here in the United States, it's hard to imagine somebody have not heard of Jesus or the Bible, but in the world, 2.7 billion or more have never heard of Jesus. 800 million of those live beyond geographic barriers that cannot be penetrated by normal means. A lot of times when we do evangelism and spread the gospel, we go into the major cities, like in the Philippines, we go to Manila. In Russia, we go to Moscow. In India, we go to Hyderabad or into the big cities, into Bombay. But there are geographic barriers that take weeks, and in some cases even more than a month by normal transportation, such as Brazil, Guyana, and many other countries that we work in that take days, weeks, even months to travel there. We can reach them in just an hour or 2 by aircraft and penetrate those barriers that geography interferes with. Even in our own country, in Alaska, we have been working for years in the mission field with aviation. People like Elder Daniel Walters, who worked as a missionary for many years, working in the jungle, in the Amazon, and all throughout the world, breaking through barriers that seem to be unreachable, or reaching the seemingly unreachable. That was done in the 60s. We carry that mission on in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and now here we are well into the 21st century, beyond the pandemic, and we're still reaching the seemingly unreachable. Daniel Walters passing on the torch, saying, "Go ye into all the world." And so at Adventist World Aviation, we penetrate the barriers of geography using aircraft, reaching that 800 million people so Jesus can come. I believe with all my heart that Jesus won't come until he has reached every last person, so that when he declares, "He that is holy will be holy still, he that is filthy will be filthy still, he that is just will be just." Jesus makes the declaration, we make the decision. But how can you decide unless you hear about him first?